This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Smile, the makers of the brand new PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPhone and iPad, as well as PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, PDF Pen for iPhone, PDF Pen for iPad, Text Expander Touch, and Disc Label. Find out more about all their great products at smilesoftware.com. Welcome to the MacJury on Mac Voices. This is a talk of the Mac community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it's now past the first weekend with the iPhone 5S, and I'm happy to welcome some friends to talk about their experiences of buying and using for the first weekend Apple's brand new iPhone. So let's first go around the room, see who you're going to hear from. I guess I'll do it by screen order this time. On my left is Mr. Peter Cohen. Peter, it's great to have you. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Chuck. How you doing?
Good. You're the guy that has more titles and more jobs than I can count now.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. So I'm managing editor at iMore, imore.com, executive editor at The Loop, loopinsight.com, and in my copious free time, I spend my weekends working at a local Apple specialist where I sell people iPods, iPads, and Macs.
No Boy Scout leader?
No.
Okay.
No, I told my kids, sorry, I don't have any time for any of that nonsense.
Next up, Mr. Rich Mogull. Rich, it's great to have you back. It's been a little while.
Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, it's been quite a while, I think.
Yeah, I'm just happy to find you off of a plane for a little while.
So are my children.
Yeah, every time I see you tweet, it's like I'm getting on a plane here, I'm getting off a plane there, I'm waiting for a plane somewhere else.
Yeah, but that's mostly the inefficiency of the airlines, not my anything special about my travel.
Okay. So what do you hail from right now? Because I know you, too, seem to have a number of flags you fly.
Yeah, so my day job is as analyst and CEO of Securosis. So we do research and advisory services on security. But your fair listeners, watchers may know me better for I'm the security editor over at Tidbits. I've been doing that for quite a while now, as well as I do a lot of freelance contributions to Macworld. So mostly on security. Occasionally they let me out of my cage to write or talk about something else.
Well, yeah, feel free if you want to throw something else in here too. So we will tap you for security, but not just for security. And last but not least, and for his first time on the MacJury, Mr. Steve Sheridan. Steve, it's great to see you.
Hey, Chuck, it's great being here. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, it's great to have you. I almost didn't recognize you with this going on. That's something new.
Yeah, recent addition, past couple months.
That's good. You look very distinguished.
Thank you.
Anything you want to plug, or are you just going to show up and be a mystery man?
I guess I could plug the show that I support, which is Allison's No Silicast podcast at podfeed.com, where I'm the videographer and kind of the general backup support guy. Also, both of us recently retired, so we have a little more time to spend doing these kinds of things.
That's great. Well, it's great to pull you out from behind the camera and put you on camera for a change.
Yeah, I'm not quite as comfortable being in front. I prefer being behind, but let me give it a shot.
Hey, we're all friends here. This is just fun. It really is.
Yes, looking forward to it.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, guys, the iPhone 5S, the iPhone 5C, I think the 5S is the flagship, so that's the thing most people are interested in. Let's start out by talking about, let's do the obvious question. What color did you want, and what color did you get? Peter?
I was standing in line for the 5S. I wanted a space gray 32 gig unit, and that's exactly what I got.
Good. Rich?
Same here, except a 64 gig. My wife, however, wanted silver. They didn't have it, and so she decided she would rather get the. I'm sorry, I hate calling it space gray. I'm going to go with black, blackish, and but she'd rather have it in hand than wait. So we both ended up with the same model.
Okay, so that's one maybe a little disappointed, but not a lot.
Yeah, and the new cases are nice enough. I think that the color almost doesn't matter if you're going to throw one of those on.
Yeah. Steve, how about you?
Yeah, also waited in line for the 5S, space gray / black 32 gig, and I got it.
Guys, there is nothing black about this thing except for the screen.
See? Front! Oh, wait. pictures of my.
But
Okay,
with
right.
the case, it is.
Okay, all right. With the case, it is.
Yeah, and I've got the zero chroma case I had on my 5. It went right on the 5S, and it's great. It's great. I'm really surprised though about the number of people that seem to be looking for gold everywhere.
Yes.
Where I went to an AT&T store to stand in line at a ridiculous hour of the morning, and there were so many people there that were just crushed that they were going to have to choose something other than gold.
I was at the local or the Apple retail store that's closest to my house, which is Derby Street in Hingham, Massachusetts. And I got there probably about 3:30 in the morning, and I was maybe the 22nd person in line or so. And the first 5 people were together, and they bought literally every gold phone that Apple had. That Apple store only got about 10 gold phones, and Apple was limiting people to 2 phones per person. They bought all 10 of them, and then they proceeded to go up and down the line, telling people that they could buy them for $800.
Oh, wow!
Now I don't know, so $150 above what the actual purchase price of the phone is. Now I don't know whether or not they found any buyers. But I do know this. Kevin Michalik, who is the CMO of Mobile Nations, the company that owns iMore, stood in line at a Miami store for his. And he was pretty far back from the front, and he knew he was not going to be able to get a gold phone because he knew that the availability of them was very limited. So he made a deal with the guy in the front of the line and bought his phone off of him for $1,500.
Ooh.
And the amazing thing is that, as Kevin recounted in a podcast that we did on Friday, a few hours after we had sort of gotten back and had a chance to shower and get the stench of waiting in line off of us, he said that the guy who sold it to him was pretty pissed off because just as he was completing the transaction, another friend of his ran up to him and said, "Hey, buddy, I got a buyer for you for $3,000."
Whoa.
So people really lost their minds trying to get a hold of the first gold iPhones off the product line. I have no idea why people would kind of lose objectivity that much. It's like Apple is going to make more of them, and it's not like they're made out of gold. I mean, gold anodization, as our editor Ali Katz-Muho will tell you, is the simplest form of anodization to do. Basically, you just dump some iron oxide in, and bingo, you get gold. So I don't understand why people are so out of their minds for the gold ones. And by the way, regardless of whether you get gold or silver, it's a white iPhone.
On the face.
Just like I was picking on you guys for calling this black because the back is space gray. Yeah, the front is black. It's a black iPhone. The white and the silver and gold ones are both white iPhones. So I'm beside myself.
I suspect all those people went out, bought a newspaper with today's date on, held that up on one side, held their phone up on the other side, and did a selfie, and that's going to be their status symbol for the rest of their meaningless lives because. Yeah. It really makes no sense that people obsessed about that when if you ordered it online, you'll get it by sometime next month. So it's like you just paid $1,500 to look cool for 6 weeks.
Well, we legitimately needed them for staging photos and stuff like that. So we wanted to make sure that we had what we needed for our production. But still, the point remains that people were really losing their minds about the gold ones, and I just don't understand why. I mean, don't buy a phone today. What's wrong with your phone? Wait a few weeks until the gold ones are in stock and get a gold one when you can. It's not like Apple's never going to produce another gold iPhone.
I think it just shows what people are willing to do to pay a premium for having the device on day one. It's incredible.
It is. And what fascinates me, too, is the people where I went, and Peter, I was there at about 4 a.m, so I slept in. Once they heard that there were no gold iPhones, they didn't turn around and leave. Then they kind of stressed over, well, can I get a silver? Oh, you only have space gray. Well, okay. If it means that much, then wait for it. If there's some, I don't know. I don't get it. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
The only reason I woke up and got in the line is because, as the security guy, I've been writing about Touch ID, and I had to have it. And to be able to write my articles and understand kind of properly how it worked. And my coworkers, the ones who aren't writing these sorts of things, I mean, they all ordered online and stayed at home. I've got 3 young kids. The last thing I want to do is wake up at 3 a.m. and go sit in line out in a store at Scottsdale. So, I don't know. I understand it to a certain degree, but for the most part, and particularly the obsession with gold and silver and paying more money for those, that's the part I just don't understand.
Yeah, and especially when you're going to most likely put some kind of case over it. That's the strange part. Steve, what time did you get up?
Well, I got up a little before 5, got in line around 5. It's the store, AT&T, by the way, not the Apple store. And the reason was the last experience, which was from my wife, involved an 11-hour wait in our local Apple store for the iPhone 4. Since then, she's bought them online. And except last year, went to the AT&T store and waited maybe an hour and a half, got in line, got her phone. So I thought I'd just repeat that. And it was fairly painless. Got there at 5. They opened at 8. Well, I think I was 12th in line, and no problem. They had a very good stock there, but only in black, no other colors.
Yeah. One thing, and we'll get to the actual phone in a second, but one thing that was interesting, after I'd been up at 4 a.m, went through the line, got in, started talking to the AT&T rep, he said, "Yeah, you could have pre-ordered this." And it's like, what? There were no pre-orders. He said, "Oh, yeah." He said, "We did it for one day last Friday where you could come in, and if you were a customer, you could pre-order it, and it would be drop shipped to you, and you would have received it today." It's like, well, that's the first I've heard of that anywhere. Did anybody else hear anything about that?
No. Was that an AT&T store?
Yes.
Now, they did not do that at our AT&T store. In fact, I asked if they were going to, and they said no pre-orders whatsoever, hoping they'd do what yours did.
Yeah, so I missed out.
Store dependent.
Yeah, I guess.
That's the only pre-orders that I was familiar with were in Hong Kong and China. Hong Kong and mainland China Apple stores, we're doing pre-orders from the 17th on for the 5S, but not here in the States. Not that I'm aware of, anyway.
Yeah, it was very strange. It surprised the daylights out of me. So, Rich, I'm going to let you get the first shot in on the thumbprint scanner, because that's the first thing I think that we all wanted to play with, and the first thing probably that, except maybe the camera, but the thumbprint scanner has been a big thing. You're the security guy. We have had all kind of jokes about people cutting off fingers to try to steal this thing. The stories have been rampant about hackers defeating the thumbprint scanner already. How good is it?
So I mean, it's one of the best fingerprint scanners that I've seen, and I've used a few out there. The speed and the overall kind of capabilities of it. I mean, literally, you click the home button, you hold your finger there for a second, and it logs in. I've tried it from different finger positions. I've used it while working out. I've used it, pretty extensively, and I think probably all of you have. It's kind of a new paradigm to be able to unlock your phone that quickly and conveniently. It's even easier than sliding to unlock without a passcode. That's kind of all within the realm of Apple. I believe their philosophy in security has become, and I did a Macworld article about this, make it invisible, improving security by improving the usability, the user experience for the users. Now, it's also a capacitive touch one, so it is, and it's very more sensitive than many of the other ones I've seen, so it is harder to fool. However, it has already been fooled. The Chaos Computer Club, some people there actually today posted a technique for going ahead and being able to build fake fingerprints. It doesn't surprise me at all that they could do that. It's just the odds of that being an issue for an average person are pretty low. So Apple very clearly has stated they're targeting this as people who don't use passcodes or use the regular 4-digit pins. And for them, it's great. It gives you extra levels of security, although in a moment I'll talk about some additional things I think you need to do at an incredible convenience factor. For those of us who still use longer passcodes, I think it's still very usable. I've got it turned on. I've just done some other security things, and there will be times when I turn it off where I don't think it's appropriate for me to use it. And overall, it is a borderline game-changing adaptation or addition to the cell phone.
I want to follow up with you on when you don't think it's appropriate to use it, but my experience has been exactly the same, and I felt like this was a huge gamble for Apple. If this had not worked as seamlessly as it seems to, at least for me, and it sounds like for you too, this would have been a disaster. But it works as advertised. I've had a hard time not getting it to recognize my trained fingers. About the only way to do it is put my fingernail on it, and then it obviously won't recognize that. Steve, what experience have you had with it?
Very similar experience. First of all, it was almost fun to program it to actually have it store your fingerprint setting, up to 5, of course. It became like a little game, but the haptic feedback when you got the right position and it started sensing, okay, I've got enough data for this position, now adjust your finger. It got me sucked in a little bit. I enjoyed programming it. It was fairly quick. And once I got that print in, it's been 3.5 days, and I think twice I've had to readjust my finger to unlock out of hundreds of attempts. I'm very, very happy with it.
Peter, I assume the experience has sort of been the same for you?
Yeah, definitely. And what's interesting for me is, as I said at the outset, I work at an Apple specialist on the weekends. And while we don't sell or service the phones, we get a lot of customers walking in the door who have questions, including a lot who don't know that we don't sell or service the phones and want us to sell them one. So, I was hauling out my phone a lot this weekend and showing it off to people who wanted to understand how the fingerprint scanner worked. And, I would unlock it with my phone, show them how it worked, and then I would encourage them to try to unlock it. And, needless to say, the iPhone shakes its head and says, no, and doesn't unlock. But the interesting thing for me was that several of our, there were, I think, 2, maybe 3 customers who actually said, so if I upgrade my iPhone 4 or my iPhone 5 with iOS 7, will it read my thumbprints? And it just reminds me that, we can pontificate about this stuff until we're blue in the face, but this stuff is still magic to a lot of people out there, as I like to call them Mugulls. They're just people who just, for whom this stuff is bizarre, and they do, they're just unclear on the fact that this is an actually completely different phone than what they've got. But it definitely works as advertised. As far as the Chaos Computer Club's hack, first of all, I think that or trick, or whatever you want to call it, I think that the guy who did it was either having a hypoglycemic reaction, or he was just really wired on coke, because his hands were kind of jittering all over the place while he was doing it. But, if you actually read the instructions that they have for how this fingerprint technology was fooled, it's such an elaborate process to reproduce. You've got to lift a clean fingerprint, first of all, and that's easier said than done. Getting a really good fingerprint. First of all, you have to know which finger the person used for their iPhone. Secondly, you need to scan it in at 2400 DPI. You need to print it at 1200 DPI, and then you need to use either pink latex or wood glue to generate the print to transfer from the negative that you're making basically from the scanned image. So it's an elaborate process. It's not an easy hack that people are just going to be able to do just to break into your phone. It's a process that I can see forensic people using. But it just seems like a long line for a short ride, as it were.
You have to be targeted. Most of the people, if you're going to be targeted like that, and this was I did a blog post on this over the weekend when it came out over at Securosis. And, if you're the kind of person that believes you're going to be targeted with an attack of that level, then you don't use it. And you probably know who you are. The one exception being is there's 2. One is dumb criminals, and let's just say we just want them to keep using it and open themselves up for law enforcement to be able to perform that kind of an attack. The other is that I think is going to be the most common is spouses and domestics and private investigator kinds of situations. And I realize some people listening, and you guys are probably like, well, that's an extreme stuff. It shocks me how many people are in absolutely screwed up relationships where they don't trust each other and they're breaking into each other's phones and playing these kinds of games. And again, I don't have a lot of sympathy at that point either. If you manage to get your life into that particular state, maybe that's, I don't know, egotistical for me in my nice, normal relationship to say. So,
you raise a really good point. And that was one of the first things that people said over the weekend as well. What's going to stop a crazy girlfriend from using her boyfriend's finger in the middle of the night to unlock his phone? Well, I don't suppose anything is going to, but, getting back to the interesting thing for me from what the Chaos Computer Club was talking about is that it was very clear that they were making it a political issue.
Yeah, and that,
as opposed to a legitimate gripe about Apple security or lack thereof. Apple never said that this is forensic proof technology. They're positioning this squarely as a convenience option for people who forget passcodes or for people who want to secure their device but have not, for whatever reason, initiated passcode locking. The interesting thing for me from the perspective of installing iOS 7 for the first time and setting up the iPhone 5S for the first time, iOS 7 does something that iOS 6 doesn't, and that is really wants you to put a passcode on your phone. This used to be something that you would add optionally later. Now, when you're setting it up, it pushes the passcode right in front of you as part of the startup process. And only in small letters at the bottom of the screen does it say, yeah, you can skip this step if you want to. Apple really wants people to use passcodes because, as it's been stated elsewhere, only about half the people who use iOS 6 devices have passcodes on them. So clearly it wasn't a technology that everybody was using. And it's important for a lot of people to have some level of security on their phones.
Well, there's some other aspects of that as well, because now data protection, which is basically it's the second level of encryption that you can have on your iPhone, which is it encrypts to a passcode. Now that's now enabled by default for all apps. It offers incredible platform security to protect all of your data. Up before it was optionally an API, and it was only enabled by default for mail, and you have to have a passcode for that to work. So that's another reason for Apple to go ahead and push that. I think overall they're doing a tremendous job on security. And I used to be like, you read some of my earlier stuff I used to write about Apple. It was very critical of security, but particularly with the advent of iOS, they've made incredible strides. The Touch ID, I think they've done a great job. I mean, I have used fingerprint readers before, unlike many of the other people I know. I just cannot tell you how much better this works compared to anything else that I've tried. I mean, the old Atrix and the other ones you see, you used to have to sort of slide your finger along it because there's an optical scanner. Didn't work very well. I use fingerprint scanners every time now crossing the border because I've got global entry, and that's slow, and it's just a horrible experience. This is beyond expectations in terms of the usability and the reliability of it. Apple really exceeded, I think, what a lot of people expected. And it is squarely all their marketing. Everything says they're not pushing this as more secure. They are pushing this, as you said, Peter, which is for people who don't use passcodes or use 4-character passcodes. Now you can get the strength of a long passcode by using just fingerprint. Although, and I'm still trying to get a reply out of Apple about this. One of the things I've noticed is that when you touch it, and it looks like it may be entering your passcode or a passcode into the actual entry screen. So I suspect if you use a 4-character passcode, that means all the encryption and such on your phone is still tied to that 4-digit PIN, as opposed to a longer passcode. That still, unless depending on how they've handled some of the other hardware aspects of the system, can still be brute forced using existing techniques should a jailbreak be discovered in a day or less. So it is important, even if you go ahead and use fingerprint until we hear otherwise, because maybe Apple's got some other magic, but you still want to use a long passcode, you just don't have to enter it as often.
Rich, you said something about there are times that you wouldn't want to use this. And that really surprised me because I guess one of the toughest things I've had to do is remember not to enter my 4-digit code, that I just have to use my thumb. Why would I not want to use the thumbprint scanner?
Well, you have to remember, I'm a security guy, so I do two things. One is I am a target when I'm traveling internationally and I'm going through customs. I have to take extra precautions on my systems when I go to certain countries. I go to China, I go to Eastern Europe sometimes. So I'm not going to, in those cases, I'm just going to disable it and go back to using the passcode, because then I don't have to worry about them getting my fingerprint or forcing me to open it. So the other, which I'm not a part of, is if you're a criminal and you're worried about, not even just a criminal, if you believe you will ever be subject to an investigation where by law enforcement agencies, we think that they may be able to force you to open your phone by just using your thumbprint, because it's not like a password in your head. The Fifth Amendment may not necessarily apply. And so in that case, you don't want to use it. And the last one is I just spend a lot of time going to hacker conferences. And I have a lot of people, and we all like to drink a lot and screw with each other. So I'm leaving my thumbprints on a whole lot of beer glasses at these things. And I'm with people who very much would be able to go through in their hotel room, would be able to do the things that were done in the Chaos Computer Club video there. And in those cases, I'm going to go ahead and disable it as well.
Here's a suggestion that I saw today, and I'm wondering what you think of this, Rich. It's been noted that thumbprints aren't the only, or fingerprints aren't the only body part that the scanner will recognize. Inevitably, somebody's used their penis, somebody used their nipple, somebody used, I think it was Daryl Etherington over at TechCrunch used his cat's paw to unlock his iPhone as well. What do you think about maybe using your knuckle or something else that isn't going to be easily imprinted on a beer glass to unlock, if that will work?
I think it's worth experimenting and trying. It's too much of a pain in the ass for me to use that day to day, because I like being able to pick up my phone, put my thumb on it, unlock it, just like I did there. But in those kinds of situations, you've got a lot of alternatives. There are some friends on Twitter saying, you could actually manufacture a fingerprint and carry it on a key fob with you. And I'm like, look, all those things are great and all those things are interesting, but man, I don't know. Call me lazy. I just want to keep it simple. But yes, using other parts of your body might work. The thing to remember, though, is there may be fewer data points, so the fingerprint template may not be as evolved, but it's still so unlikely, because you have to lose physical control of your phone, and somebody has to have your fingerprint. After having lost physical control of your phone, it has to be done within 48 hours, and when the phone hasn't been rebooted. So there's a lot of ways that where you haven't disabled it with Find My iPhone. And if you combine all of those things, I think the relative risk for the average person is minuscule. And I think for people who do face that risk, then they have alternate options like not using it. So I think Apple's done a good job in terms of who the target market for this is, being clear about that, being clear about the risk. What I would like to know more, though, and I think, honestly, they're just not doing themselves any favors by not talking more about what the secure enclave is. I did some research, and I think I figured it out, but we don't know exactly what it is and how that architecture has been defined and what the risk of the secure enclave itself are, because I do believe passcodes are probably stored there encrypted, not hashed, which is different than how we normally manage passcodes.
This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Smile, the makers of world-class software for the Mac, iPhone, and iPad. Smile has just released the brand new PDF Pen Scan Plus for the iPhone and iPad. Now, you can use your iDevice to scan receipts, documents, and more anywhere you are. PDF Pen Scan Plus automatically detects page edges and crops the scan to fit, allows you to enhance the scan to be more readable, and adjust scan resolution for color, grayscale, or text. But that's just the beginning. You can also perform optical character recognition, known as OCR, on the document right there, on the spot, to create searchable PDF documents that can then be emailed, exported, or stored in Evernote, Dropbox, and other cloud services. Text becomes selectable and can be copied to other applications, and 16 different languages are supported by OCR. If you thought PDF Pen was essential for your iPhone or iPad before, you will be blown away by the power and convenience of PDF Pen Scan Plus. Get it now at a special introductory price on the iOS App Store, or visit smilesoftware.com for more information. Smile. Great software for your Mac, iPhone, and iPad. Thanks to Smile for sponsoring this edition of MacVoices. Rich, is there any chance that somewhere, either existing or that the scanner could be trained or used to capture somebody else's fingerprint? So that if Peter steals my phone, that he goes and tries to unlock it that way and inadvertently or intentionally puts his thumb there, can I get his fingerprint back? Or do you think it could be stored in a secure enclave then for later retrieval?
No, and I've done a bunch of research on what I think the secure enclave is and how it works, and did a big write-up on that today. And I think because of the nature of that, it's actually very interesting. And for the long term, from a platform perspective, it's very interesting. But, as you notice, you have to train your thumb. You don't just take, a single image of it. My assessment right now is that I believe the fingerprint scanner is hard-coded to the secure enclave and not usable by other parts of iOS. And now maybe Apple has the potential to change that. But it's basically, the secure enclave, I think, is using a technology called Trust Zone, which is part of the ARM processor specifications. And one of the things it allows you to do is tie hardware to the secure enclave through a variety of different techniques. And it's designed basically for secure payment entry and other kinds of scenarios. And I suspect that the Touch ID sensor is probably tied to the secure enclave using that Trust Zone technology, which means there's no way for the rest of the operating system, even if you fully jailbreak it, to gain any access at all to using the actual sensor itself.
Rich,
So
I had a question about that. A lot of people have been saying the true value of this fingerprint sensor Touch ID technology will be when the API is open to other applications. Did what you just say will that prevent this from being released to other developers for access? Or could it potentially be used by other apps?
It can, but in an interesting way. So it depends on how it works. So what Trust Zone does, and you can read the Trust Zone spec, or I can send you guys the link if you want to read what I wrote up on this, is there's a bunch of different ways to implement it, but effectively it creates a secure zone and a normal zone on an ARM processor, or even an ARM multi-core processor. And anything in the Trust Zone is inaccessible by anything in the normal zone. Anything in the normal zone is accessible by the Trust Zone. So what you may be able to do is an app, if Apple opens up the API to do this, could say, I want to enable fingerprint, Touch ID. That would then, through the operating system, it's not that app would ever see your fingerprint. It's that the device would make the assertion that the registered fingerprint through that secure zone is the fingerprint that was just entered, and then that gets passed on to the application. What it basically can do is take over the screen, the display, and take over the input, and then provide that. And if you securely store your credential in the secure zone, in that secure enclave, so the password for your bank or whatever else, then that would be released and can be automatically entered into that application. So I think there's ways that it can work with the API without compromising the security of the secure zone. The question is, I had to make a bunch of assumptions here. Apple hasn't revealed the details. However, everything that I research is consistent with their public statements, but there's a lot of little subtle details about how all of that pieces together that we just don't know yet. But I do think it's possible down the road, and I think it offers some pretty intriguing alternatives, especially, and I know I'm blabbering on here a little bit, you can actually do things as well is you can actually have other secure hardware channels. So I'm kind of wondering if you could have the secure zone tie up with the Bluetooth LE, and you could actually securely transmit credentials over the Bluetooth radio without the regular rest of iOS being involved. And you could do some interesting kind of payment applications there as well. Who knows?
Interesting. I guess it's been said a dozen times on Twitter that I've seen that if you are a target for people that want to do this, like Rich said, you have bigger problems than the iPhone. You need to be taking a lot of the precautions. So for the rest of us, it's pretty good, and it does offer a new level of security from the bad guys.
Agreed.
The bad guys were like we do encounter.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There's going to be people crashing their cars as they're trying to check their email while typing in their PIN code.
I think the solution would be not to check your email, Rich, but maybe one step at a time.
I don't know. You do the privacy of your own car is none of my business.
Yeah. Well, the next big feature, I think, is the camera. And Steve, this is where we'll turn to you because you're the videographer, photographer of this group. At least I think you're certainly more accomplished than I am. I did some, everything we typically do. You take a few shots. You take shots in a dark room to see how the flash adjustments work. I think it's a better camera. It just from my eye, it seems to produce definitely better results.
Agreed. I think it is a better camera. We did. My wife and I did some testing over the past couple days, and this by no means is exhaustive or comprehensive. But we did test against several cameras. The one I want to focus on is 5S versus 5. By the way, I came from an iPhone 4, so this is heads and tails above what I was used to. But we looked at several scene settings, including bright light out in a marina, a really intense floral arrangement in bright light, low light without a flash, and low light with a flash. And I do have some observations. I'll try to keep them brief here, but in the bright light marina situation, so we're talking reflections off water, boats, and so forth, the 5 seemed to produce a little more intense blues. The 5S was a little washed out in comparison, but I think it more accurately portrayed the scene. The blues seem to be highlighted with the 5. In the floral situation, most phone cameras seem to have trouble with intense reds. The reds will saturate, so you lose detail. So we got a shot of some bougainvillea, red bougainvillea. With the 5, we did see that effect. Complete saturation, losing detail. The 5S pulled that detail out and was not saturated, and that was significant. I could definitely see the difference there. In the low light situation, a little bit less noise in the with the 5S than the 5, but not, I would say noticeable, but not hugely significant, not as much as I expected. And when the flash was invoked, the 5S did seem to have better color reproduction than the 5 with flash. So that's not a fully extensive review, but those are just some of my initial observations looking at the two phones.
Yeah, and I think if it can be noticeably better, it doesn't have to be perfect, but if it's marginally better, I think it's going to sell more 5Ss because people are going to say, oh, well, I was going to buy a point and shoot. I can now buy an iPhone 5S, take that money, upgrade my phone, upgrade everything. And that was my experience too, especially with the flash, that things didn't seem nearly as white blue. They came out with a lot definitely better tones.
Yeah.
Peter, you play with it at all?
Yeah, absolutely. The True Tone flash on the 5S makes a big difference in terms of white balancing. Using a flash just in general is always kind of sketchy and difficult, but it's unavoidable when you're using something as small as a camera phone to shoot in low light conditions. The 5S shoots much better in low light conditions than the 5 or the 4 did. Absolutely, much better in low light conditions. Bright light, I would have to agree with Steve. I think it washes out more than the 5 did, and it's I don't know, it's not as great as some of the other stuff that I've seen other camera phones do as well. But all in all, the one weakness for the 5 for me was using it with in low light conditions, like at a concert venue, where you want to take pictures of the band on the stage. There'd always be a lot of noise and so on. Low light conditions and burst mode on the 5S is fantastic. The slow motion video too. I've been having a lot of fun with the slow motion video. I wish I was like Jim Dalrymple at the Loop and had a dog to catch frisbees for me, because some of the stuff that he's been shooting with his dogs are great. But there's a lot to recommend the 5S from the camera perspective. It's funny because Apple talks about how the sensor captures light in shorter wavelengths than it did before. It's like 1.5 microns versus what was it, 2 for the sensor on the 5. It's a surprisingly difficult thing to explain to people who don't really understand camera sensor technology, because you're basically saying, look, it's still an 8 megapixel sensor, but they're 8 better megapixels than they were before. But the analogy holds. It is definitely a market improvement in quality under most circumstances, I think.
Yeah, I found though that it was surprisingly not quite as good for. So I don't have dogs; I have young children, and who are just as unlikely to stand still. And the burst mode does help, but I was trying to take a picture of one of my daughters in the kitchen last night with all the lights on in the kitchen, and it actually I had a real hard time getting a sharp picture out of that, just with the normal twitching and jittering, even using the burst mode. So I mean, it definitely helps. It's not quite from that level as a dramatic improvement, but the flash most definitely. I hate flashes like anybody else who's got a photography background. You really want to use the flash as kind of a last resort, but it's the first time I felt like a camera phone flash was usable. And to some degree, I think it was actually a little bit more usable than even my standard flash. And then even, like I have a Sony RX100, so you can flip it up and do a bounce flash off the ceiling even on a point and shoot. And I think it was even better than that. The problem is I'd love to have the ability to adjust the tone of the flash to get that white balance point set differently. Took some photos last night of one of my kids in her bedroom. And the colors, it was a very accurate color representation of the room, but from an artistic standpoint, it's not what I was looking for. And so, of course, I can adjust that in post, but it'll be interesting to see how that adapts over time.
The things I shot with it, the one thing I didn't get to play with as much, because Peter, you're interesting. You said concert. I went to an outdoor concert on Saturday, and I didn't get a chance to shoot any video because we were standing in the pouring down rain, and I wasn't about to get my brand new iPhone out and shoot anything with it. But the little bit of playing I did yesterday with some of the slow motion and all, it's surprisingly easy and fun to do, and it looks great. And it seems to be performing as advertised for me.
Yeah, it's exactly. I think a lot of it depends on what your use case is too. I mean, some people are going to have great experience with their cameras, and other people are going to be more edge cases because they may be a little bit more demanding in what they're doing. And I mean, let's face it, we're trying to look at this stuff with a critical eye. So we're doing comparisons that may not hold true in real life. It's a little bit like when you go to the big box retailer, electronics retailer, and they've got like 4 TVs, flat panel TVs set side by side. You look at the $2,000 set, and you're like, wow, that color looks amazing. It's so realistic. I understand why it costs $2,000 compared to the $500 set. But you know what? You get that $500 set home and installed in your living room, and you don't give a damn anymore because, all of a sudden you're watching Iron Man 3 in 50 inches, on your wall, and all is good. So comparisons only go so far to tell the average user what their experience with the device is going to be like.
I wrote in an email to somebody. I said, to me, it felt like the most usable camera phone. And the reason being is that the combination of all the features. There's so little you have to do as the operator. So as much as myself would probably want to get to more detail, in terms of just pulling out a phone and taking a good picture on your camera phone, I think it has that right balance of features, about as good as you can get, short of putting bigger lenses on these things and bigger sensor sizes. And fun. I mean, the slo-mo, I wouldn't have thought about it, but like you guys said, we were at the mall, my kids were running around crazy, and I took a picture of that, and my kids running after me, smiling and giggling, has never looked so dramatic before. Yes. And it was great. I'm going to use that all the time for all sorts of stuff, and as cheesy as it is, there's a reason they've used it in every action movie on the face of the planet since the dawn of time, because it works.
The other thing I love is how it doesn't just slow motion video, it slow-mos the audio as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So all of a sudden your kids are making monster noises.
Steve, you and I have the same, I think pretty much the same camcorders that we use. I have to tell you, putting this side by side with that, and I know Peter's example about the side by side TVs is a great one, but you can't help it. You put, the camcorder video beside this. Yeah, this looks every bit as good.
I would say in good light, that's true. We're talking video, right? So in low light, I think our camcorders still do a bit better, but I would expect that with the size of the sensors. But for most situations, this is going to be the camera I go to, video camera. One thing I noticed that was interesting, now, I didn't have the 5. When I was taking extensive video with the 5S, the right side, I'm talking if you hold it vertically, the right side of the camera, backside, heated up more than I've ever noticed an iPhone heat up before. Has anyone else felt that effect on the phone?
Was it when you were using the video?
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Is that unique to the 5S, or did you see it before in the 5?
No, I saw it on the 5 too. And I mean, just remember, the 5 and the 5S both have these giant aluminum heat sinks on the back side of them. So, their back planes are just single pieces of metal. So they do conduct heat. And that isn't the only thing that'll heat it up. If you install Infinity Blade 3 from Epic and Share Entertainment, that game roasts your phone too. Not to an unsafe level, but it definitely gets the processor going in a way that not a lot of applications do.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was coming from a 4, which has a glass back. It probably doesn't conduct the heat quite as well. And I never noticed it with the 4.
Yeah, I've had that with the 5, especially for shooting video and if I'm shooting any kind of decent length of video. But to be clear, we're talking about warm, not hot, not to the point that you can't touch it. You're not even close to that. It just, as you say, becomes noticeably warmer.
Yep.
Yeah, something that would be pleasant to have, running at that temperature in January when you're recording a football game.
Little hand warmer.
The iPhone is hand warmer.
Exactly.
Guys, I do want to touch on sort of a related topic as we wrap up here, but the new processor. Things definitely, and I don't know whether it's iOS 7 or whether it's the phone or what, but everything feels nice and crisp. And as far as from a usability standpoint, things pop open, things, go closed quick. Not that the 5 was lagging that much, but this just has a crisper feel to me. Steve, you having that experience?
I'm probably not the one to ask because, as I said, I'm coming from an iPhone 4, not a 4S, a 4. So everything is very, very crisp. I'm pleased as punch, but it's probably better to ask someone coming from a 5.
Yeah. So, Rich, Peter, crisp?
It's no noticeable lag or slowdown with anything I've thrown at it yet. And I thought somebody else wrote this, and I can't remember where I saw it, that they thought their 5 was fast, and then they used a 5S, and I'm in the same camp. And it's subtle because you don't really notice it until you actually do a little bit of comparison. Everything just happens. I think the A7 is probably going to be, I don't think we're going to even be able to test the edges of the capabilities of it on the 5S. I think it's going to be when that's incorporated into the iPad that we're going to figure out where the fringes of that performance are.
the iOS 7 experience scales very well from the 5 down to the 5 and up to even down to the 4S and between the 4S and the 5S. When you get down to an edge case like an iPad 2 or even an iPad Mini or a 4, you start to notice some differences in transitions and the way that in sort of the response of the device, especially booting from a hard reset or a cold boot, as it were. It tends to lag a little bit. It tends to be a little slow when you're using it with various applications. That's not as present in the 5 as it is in edge case machines. And it's certainly not present in the 5S. Just in terms of general use, the 5S is great. I've loaded the 5S with some stuff that I know is really processor intensive, and it keeps up with it really well. But it's a subtle difference, I think, for a lot of people. If you don't have the experience of the 5S, you'll be very content with a 5 or a 5C running iOS 7 and whatever apps you want on it, and it's going to be a great experience for you. But when you step up to a 5S, it's like unwrapping a quad-core iMac with an i7 processor in it for the first time, or putting a Mac Pro on your desk and ripping video and Handbrake for the first time. All of a sudden, you realize, holy crap, I'm using a really fast machine here, and that's kind of how I feel with this. I'm going to be really curious, and the funny thing is, I know that as cool as this machine is right now, the 6 is going to be even cooler, and the 6S is going to be amazing. And that pisses me off because, well, I'm just going to enjoy driving the best car on the block for now. What can I tell you?
Yeah. Thanks for that perspective there, Peter. I was just up at 4 a.m. to get this, and you're looking forward to the next one.
Oh yeah. Well, there's always room for improvement, but what I'm concerned with is with the 64-bit processor specifically is the inevitable bloat that comes from 64-bit apps. There is going to be a little bit of size differentiation for binaries that take advantage of 64 bits compared to 32-bit binaries. It's not a lot, but when you're dealing with a 16-gig machine, you're dealing with a fairly limited amount of storage capacity for some of the apps that are coming down the pike now through the App Store. The one thing that I wish that Apple had been able to do, and I don't know if there was an engineering reason why they didn't do this or if it just wasn't cost effective, is that I would have loved to have seen a 128 gig iPhone. And I've been saying this for a while. But I have a 120 gig iPod Classic around my office someplace. I haven't seen it actually in months, but I'm very fond of it because it's the only device, the only iOS or the only iDevice I own that can actually hold the bulk of my music collection. Everything else has to go in iTunes Match and iTunes in the cloud, and I just have to deal with downloading it when I want to hear it. And iTunes Radio is a game changer. It's nice to be able to stream this stuff. But, I would like to have all that music in the palm of my hand again. And we're still not at that point, and it's very frustrating for me. So I want more storage capacity in these things.
I'm with you. I really struggle because I travel a lot, and so videos on my iPad. If I combine my videos, app data, and some music, I can fill that thing in a heartbeat. I mean, it's just, ridiculous how quick you can fill that. Because why? Well, if I download an HD show, and why would I not download HD? Because that's, if I buy through iTunes, so what was it, The Bridge? Each episode was between 1.3 and 1.6 gigs per episode downloaded. So it was hard to get it onto my device because of the download times, and then very, very quickly filled up that device. I did take off all of my kids' shows, and then when I travel with them, I have to put all those back on. So, it would be really nice to have that extra overhead. I'd pay for it. Okay, wait. Work would pay for it, but
and I think that both of you've hit the issue is the price point. The iPhone at 64 gig without with AT&T and Verizon and all the carriers continuing to play these contract upgrade games, I don't think it's going to be there. I think there's a much better chance, personally, of a 128 gig iPad because your contracts you're not under contract, you're not locked in. The same way you are.
There is a 128 gig iPad.
Oh, that's right. There is. Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
You're
it's
right.
a special order device. You don't see them too often, but Apple makes them, and they're available for $7.99 without Wi-Fi. So, I don't move a lot of them in the store that I work in, but every once in a while, somebody will come in the door, a doctor, for example, who wanted to use it to store not patient data, but other large data sets on his machine. He wanted one. We got a pilot in the door, a private pilot who wanted every map and every airport map ever on his machine, and he decided to go for the 128. So there are a few use cases for it, but $800. You're talking about $200 away from a MacBook Air. Why not just get a MacBook Air at that point?
Yeah. But I want that pilot, Peter. I want him to be flying my plane because he's got all the maps.
As long as he remembers to charge up his iPad before he leaves.
Well, guys, we're getting short on time, so I want to go around and just ask, buy, no buy, wait for the iPhone 5S. I can't see any reason to wait unless you just are waiting on the contract and you don't want to pay the exorbitant fees to upgrade beyond that. Steve?
I would agree. If you want to stay with your contract cycle, it's an uptick and a substantial one in several areas. But for me, I stay with the contracts. I don't buy every year. So some people are willing to take that hit, maybe get a top dollar for their 1-year-old phone. For them, that's a great step up, I think, from a 5 to a 5S.
Rich?
Yeah, I think that if it's within your price point, just get it. You will be very happy. The camera and Touch ID alone, I think, are worth it, even without the additional speed of the processor. And plus, there's all the other under the hood changes, but the convenience and the usability of it. But if you're happy with what you have, don't feel that you have to do this. It's not like apps will be fully taking advantage of a lot of these new capabilities anytime soon. So you do have a runway for it.
But boy, when they do. Peter?
I think it really depends on what device you're upgrading from. If you've got a 4 or earlier, don't even think about it. Just do it. You're gonna see a world of difference. 4S, I think the case can be made to upgrade from a 4S to a 5S pretty easily because you get the added benefit of LTE. And depending on your carrier, if you're in an area where your carrier services, or if you're in an area where your carrier offers LTE, you are going to see a huge difference in data performance over that carrier's network. So, in the event that you're not using Wi-Fi and you need to download stuff to your phone, whether it's, it's iTunes in the cloud or whether, it's a data file from work, you are going to see a pretty significant difference. The 5S is a marvelous machine. But it also represents either a renewal of your contract, or in the case of somebody like me who doesn't want to be saddled with a contract, a pretty significant cash outlay. So you've really got to decide for yourself based on your own circumstances as to whether you want to do it or not. But I would say for anybody who's using a 4 or earlier, definitely get it.
I'd like to reinforce or add to something you said. Don't forget also with the 5, you get the larger screen. So if that's something that you want with the 5 and the 5S. So if you're coming from a 4S, yeah, I agree. I just put iOS 7 on one of my old 4S's and gave it away to a family member, and it works fine. I mean, everything's responsive, everything's great. But if you want the larger screen, then obviously you need to go to a 5S. And look, the only reason the 5C is really there, we didn't talk about that, I think, is when it comes down to price. And I know people who can't afford the 5S. It's just not within the game for them. I don't think there's any reason to go from a 4S or a 5 to a 5C. I mean, clearly not a 5 to a 5C. I don't think it's worth it going from a 4S to a 5C, perhaps from a 4 to a 5C. But if you're in that situation, yeah, I'd sock the money away and just wait till you can go to a 5S or a 6 when that comes out, because that makes a lot more sense than going to a 5C. I think that's more for the people who don't listen to shows like this and who just walk into the AT&T and the Verizon store and they're going to buy what's cheap. And that's a huge, massive part of the market. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're someone that actually deliberates and cares, if you think about what phone you're buying more than when you just walk into the store, hang out and wait until you can go for the additional models.
And Rich, since you added to Peter, I'm going to add to Steve. If you are looking to the upgrade, don't wait. Get it and sell your old phone now while it's retaining value. And go to Gazelle.com, go to Amazon. Those seem to be the two best places that are paying the best money. Whatever you do, at least based on what I saw in my AT&T store on launch day, don't do the trade-in there because they are paying bottom dollar. Right. Some of these other places are paying top. And make sure you include that in your calculation as to what the new phone will cost, because you get pretty decent money depending on what you're trying to sell. Amazon
is the best I've seen thus far.
Is it?
Yeah, at least for the 4 that I just sold.
Hey, I've got a question for you guys. Did you do Apple Care Plus? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, I think everybody do Apple Care Plus.
The reason I did Apple Care Plus is because, as I said before, I'm off contract, so I don't have any carrier insurance plan. If I was on contract and I had a carrier insurance plan, like the new Jump Upgrade program from T-Mobile, T-Mobile's my carrier, I probably would not have gotten Apple Care Plus because it just would have been, another thing that I had paid for that offered complimentary protection. But because I don't have any other insurance on my phone, I thought Apple Care Plus was a wise investment. But people listening should be aware that the terms of Apple Care Plus have recently changed. It costs $100 to buy, just like it always has, but the per incident charge for Apple Care Plus is now $79. It used to be $49. Yeah. So it's more expensive to use than it used to be. But still, I mean, $180 is a lot cheaper than the cost of a replacement phone. So,
amen.
Yeah, and for the carrier insurance, be careful with that one as well, because some of them, the charges over the 2-year period that Apple Care Plus covers you, it actually ends up costing more. So just do the math, and then look at the per incident coverage as well from your carrier and the limitations and everything. But that's a pretty straight out comparison. I'm sure somebody's got it up on the web somewhere.
One last thing about that. The carrier insurance plans for Verizon and AT&T are absolute ripoffs because you are paying twice for their upgrade plans. The Verizon Edge and AT&T Next, or vice versa, I can't remember which one it is, because you are already paying the subsidization cost of your phone, and then you're paying for the right to upgrade as well. I detest AT&T and Verizon. It's just my pet peeve. They'll soak money from you anywhere they can. Anyway, that's my rant.
And I'm going to add one last thing too. In my opinion, and I think Peter alluded to it with 64-bit bloat, get the largest phone RAM-wise that you can afford, because as Rich was saying, it takes nothing, it seems, to fill these things up. Maybe you're not going to watch a lot of movies on your phone or a lot of TV shows, but you're still going to have stuff that you just want in there. And so I went for the 64 gig, and I'm happy. It's tougher to fill up. It's not impossible. It's just tougher. Guys, thank you. This has been interesting. It sounds like we all had a great first weekend with the iPhone 5S, and we're looking forward to a lot more.
Absolutely.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Peter Cohen, Rich Mogull, Steve Sheridan, thank you for serving on the MacJury this time around.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. The verdict is in on the iPhone 5S first weekend. Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, app.net, Google+, Facebook, and for more Apple, Mac, and tech-related shows, including MacVoices, Mac Notables, the MacJury, and the MacVoices Briefing. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com.